I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.
Welcome to Cookies, the world's most influential basketball podcast. I am Ben Dietrich. Jordan Rodelli is on vacation, but Andrew Kuo does not take days off. Wow. Mr. Andrew Kuo, how are you feeling on this glorious Tuesday afternoon in New York City?
Well, in my culture, they call this the Tuesday after the 1-year anniversary of the Cookies Hoops Classic. So I'm feeling amazing just thinking wistfully, Defun Wist, about that wonderful day a year ago, Ben.
That was a great day. October 19th, 2019. The first annual Cookies Hoops Basketball Classic.
It was incredible. There was friendship. There was food. There was drip. There was hooping. People got buckets. People gave buckets. Mm-hmm. It was a joy to be.
And all I can think of is, let's do it again.
Oh, we're doing it again after this after this disaster. I've been tracking these numbers, man. We will have a triumphant Cookies Hoops Classic 2 when this is all over.
What a year.
Trust.
What a year. I was trying to decide if it felt like a year, and I guess it does, but it doesn't feel like a normal one.
It feels like a long time ago, and it feels like yesterday, man. We have been in various states of lockdown since March. Rudy Gobert, that night feels like a long time ago, man.
But also because it's been so suspended in existence that nothing has actually happened. And this kind of makes me think about when my mom was telling her stories of childhood. And these are, of course, exaggerated in the way that the elderly love to do. And she was like, well, all we did as kids was wait for the mail to arrive. And I'm like, you know what? I don't believe that. That's not what you did. But it feels like we've spent the last year waiting for the mail to arrive.
Yeah. Is
the vaccine here? Is the vaccine here?
Yeah.
Nope.
Is the stimulus here? Is what?
No.
Not on their watch.
No, you go get your beans. You show them who's boss. We'll try this again tomorrow.
Is the next Cookies Hoops Classic here? Unfortunately, no. But that was a huge success the first time around.
Oh, an incredible success. I mean, that's more and more people are saying that.
Royal Ivy and Last Lap took the crown barely over Williamsburg Pizza. It was a battle. There were some dogs on that court, man.
No, that was super fun. We're going to do it again. And yes, we're caught up in a little nostalgia because it was the 1-year anniversary. Overall, just kind of talking about the last year in New York City, COVID era. You know, walking around on these streets, these beautiful afternoons on these streets. They seem precious. These gorgeous warm days in encroaching on late October.
You're a street peeper.
I peep some leaves. They feel, but I'm saying they feel. I'm a street peeper. Not on a Zoom call, but a street peeper nonetheless.
Tubin.
Really hitting the nail on the head there.
Just Tubin over here. Tubin.
Anyway, what I was saying was, these days feel really precious, and I'm not the whistiest. I've defunded it. I've abolished whist. But walking around and seeing all the little ramshackle outdoor dining spots that restaurants and bars have built, I'm really feeling like New York did its best. Like we tried. The people, not the city itself, not the state, not the feds, but the city. You see people sitting in like some plastic tarp covered apparatus, shivering, eating food off a paper plate, and I'm like, man, New Yorkers went and did it. They tried their absolute best. Good job, everyone. Way to keep up the civic spirit, despite so much to the contrary.
The bright turquoise and bright pink coats of paint that have covered all these outdoor seating arrangements has worn off a little bit. I walked across the bridge last weekend, and on my way into Brooklyn, I saw people setting up an Instagrammable scene where they spelled out the word vote in flowers on the Williamsburg Bridge. It was cute. I'm down for it. I don't mind people reminding everyone to vote. I think it's cool. Anyway, I spent the day in Brooklyn. I saw my co-host of this podcast from a window, which was exciting. And then I walked back when the sun was like going down, and people had picked apart the flowers and taken some home, and like that's it. Kind of, no, this is kind of too wistful for cookies, but like you think you want to live in this pristine, awesome white box, or you buy some new kicks and you're like, oh, these are the new Travis Scotts. They're perfect. There's nothing wrong with them. I'm like, but they're made for wearing, so the minute you wear them, they're not going to be perfect anymore, and we just have to live with that. And that's what feels like. October feels like that for New York City.
Do you want to live in Singapore, a dead stock city?
Yo, listen, man, you take those Yeezys out the box, and they're just New York City gross, like sponges.
No, I was walking home on Sunday night. It's probably around like 10:30. It wasn't particularly late, but most things were closing up or had closed. And coming through an industrial area, there was one place where people were playing music outside and hanging out. And then a couple blocks away, a truck had pulled up, and they were just raving. Like, just blasting music, and there was maybe 100 people there just
like,
around this truck.
Like ranting and raving, or like drug, LSD, dancing, raving? Like
they were just
Happy
dancing,
Mondays?
hanging out, dancing next to a truck playing techno, house music, industrial stuff. But on a Sunday night, on a block with nothing there, they'd clearly told people that we're going to do this. It wasn't a business. It wasn't anything. It's just 50 people hanging out, 100 people hanging out on the street with like a mini rave. And I'm just like, good job. You guys are making the best of it. Like, way to keep fighting the good fight. You got to rave somewhere. The rave must go on.
Can I rave shame for a minute? Let me rave shame for a minute. Shame. What is the difference between dancing and raving? If someone
You're talking to the wrong guy about that.
I mean, okay, so this is where I was trying to bait you into. The conversation I was trying to bait you into.
Oh, okay.
When I think of raving, I think of drugs. So when you tell me you're raving, I'm like, oh, what drugs did you pick? This is an old-ass thought, the Tunnel on the west side, all those clubs on the west side, like the Limelight. That was less about dancing, and it was kind of more about, like, a certain style and a certain, like, signifier to certain drugs. And
For sure. I mean, the Tunnel having like techno trance nights. Like, I remember going to those. And
yeah, man.
I would not call them specifically dance parties in the way that you're describing.
Yeah.
I agree. They were about ketamine and ecstasy. Just they're about doing drugs.
Yeah, so when we spent a lot of times hanging out in bars, and sometimes those bars would kind of segue into clubs, and it would feel more like that, where there was a line around the block to get in. The drinks were kind of higher priced. The music kind of echoed what you would hear in a club more than a bar. But to me, that wasn't a rave. So when people would be like, oh man, I went to, that place last night and I danced for 4 hours. It was a straight up rave. I'm like, well, what drugs did you do? It's like, no, I was just drinking. I'm like, oh, okay, we're talking about two different things. And this is where I'm kind of a rave originalist.
Oh, I love that you're a rave originalist.
I am. I'm like, it's, the Talking Heads were punk. But when I think of punk, I think of like the things that signify that, which is like distortion, guitars, Doc Marten boots, mohawks, whatever. But yeah, the feeling of a rave or the feeling of punk exists. I get it. You do things with the ethos of that thing, and it is that thing, whatever. I'm cool with it. But we're talking about dancing a long time. I always go right to like, oh, like, what did you take? Is this a conversation about dancing to a Strokes song or a Travis Scott song.
See, I think there is no question that alcohol and specifically drugs, mostly drugs, are a big part of raving, bigger than alcohol. But
yeah, and alcohol's not a part of it.
No, I would agree. I was more saying like that what you ingest is part of the rave experience, but I think the rave itself, if you said a rave, can you have a rave in a like known establishment? Or does a rave have to be in a warehouse in the middle of nowhere?
Or
Does
like
it
in the
have to be
Midwest, yeah.
outdoors? Does it have to be at almost a festival? So to me, it's like a rave has a lot of connotations that also include the space you're in, the duration. Does it go for like days on end?
Mm-hmm.
Does it include
style,
as
drip,
you said,
all that stuff?
yeah, like do you have glow sticks?
Yeah.
Are there
How
glow
big are
sticks?
those parachute pants? Were your pants once parachutes? And I know I sound like an ancient artifact, but I love like the Ridgewood raves that are happening. You know, Ghetto Gothic was kind of a rave, and there's different permutations of this thing. But sometimes, like, I'm confused as to what people are talking about. So I just want clarity.
What I was talking about outside would certainly be more of a dance party.
We love those.
I would not say it was a rave. I used rave in a non-raver originalist sense.
No rave shaming, man.
There were not like glowing pacifiers.
Yeah.
There were not. I don't know what drugs people were using, but it was clearly too temporal of an event to even be a rave.
Yeah.
Truck pulled up, was playing music, people were dancing outside of it.
And like,
But again,
yeah.
doing the best they can.
I can get lost in this rave originalist shtick forever, man. Cut me off.
Enough.
Enough with the rave shaming.
Beyond us praising our own basketball tournament,
Very cool.
thank you to all of our Patreons. And there's a couple new hats that are available right now for Patreons only. But tomorrow, maybe by the time you hear this pod, they will be unveiled to the general population of the world at large.
A lot of these items don't make it out of Patreon. If there's
It happens. There are certainly a few things that have never made it to public consumption. As crazy as that sounds.
And when you break it down, that plus the hours of ethical potting that goes on, it pays for itself. Come on.
You are making money. But yes, 3 new hats, all corduroy. They are glorious items. They are
For all your street peeping needs.
Yeah, they're great for going to take short rides to glare at leaves. They'll all be available as of, let's say, Wednesday on cookieshoops.com. Also, thank you to Kat Marnell, our gossip correspondent who came through last episode with her usual heaters and all that scalding tea.
Clutch. She just wanted it more. Always.
She's got the clutch gene, man.
Mm-hmm. No doubt.
So what's new with you, man? Like, you were yelling Tubin in the background a little while ago. What's up with that?
Listen,
what's that about?
I dressed up for this podcast. I'm wearing a clean sweatshirt. I'm wearing my Dickies pants. I'm wearing shoes, crispy Hokas. Mm-hmm. Unlike your man's tube dog, Jeffrey Tubin over here, who hilariously what's the best way to put this? He fumbled the bag. He did not secure the bag.
Let the hog out of its sty?
Can you tell our listeners what we're talking about?
Well, they already know, but...
The funniest thing to happen this week.
Jeffrey Tubin, a writer for The New Yorker.
CNN correspondent,
was on a Zoom call, or several Zoom calls, but one of which had, I don't know, double-digit amount of his coworkers from The New Yorker.
They were running through like a simulation of a show they would have.
Which I didn't really get, and that derailed me from the whole incident, because I was trying to figure out how 10 people from The New Yorker were doing an election simulation. I didn't understand what that even entailed.
Oh, it's like the bubble. It doesn't count. So like whoever wins that election simulated show. It's just it has an asterisk, so it's just for fun. And now the regular programming continues.
Oh, I was confused by what it was, but at any rate, the tube dog.
Oh,
He's over there.
tubular.
The meat tube. He starts jerking off. He disrobes, apparently. He exposes himself and starts jerking off. And I guess he did not know that the cameras were on. He did not know that the audio was on. And potentially, I guess it was a private Zoom towards someone else that was not in the member of the New Yorker organization. That was one thing I heard, but who can say for sure? But anyway, he logged off. Then he logged back on and apparently was doing the same thing again. And no one thinks this was intentional. Everyone is, I think, on the same page that he made a horrible, horrible mistake. But no one thinks it was on purpose.
Well, did he fly too close to the sun? Was the excitement the fact that he could be caught with just a random click, the wrong click? Is this like a public act? Do you know what I mean? A public but private act.
I wondered about that. Because is it the fact that all these people who are your contemporaries that you respect and that this could have, as we've seen, career jeopardizing ramifications? Does that get your dander up when you're self-flagellating in the way that the tube man was going? But I don't know. It might have also been sheer boredom.
Respect for a 6-year-old young man who still has that gusto, man. He's a freak, and we love freaks, I guess. I don't know. Is this the right kind of freak? I like acid jazz.
I like that you've taken a stand.
Yes, this is like the knitting factory.
You said like, Tube is a freak, and you're not going to shame his kink.
Yeah, it's like the Lounge Lizards, right? It's like kind of like this weird avant-garde shit, and there's horned instruments, and he's a horned dog, and this is all tubing. Everyone's tubing in the same river, right?
There's a lot of metaphors, and they're mixing, not unawkwardly. But going back to what you were saying before, I don't know if he was specifically aroused by the proximity to like disaster, to his professional environment. I don't know. I will say, and maybe you'll back me up on this. Who will? But you know, when you were a man in your own house,
was his wife there in the house?
I'm not sure, but you know, you're kind of used to like touching your junk without thinking about it. I'm not suggesting that
this is taking a turn, man.
No, I'm not saying you're used to
you tubing?
I mean, am I jerking off right now? Yes. No, I mean, was it a product of him basically zoning out on a work thing and just sort of being there at a desk by himself and like, just he ends up like grabbing his junk?
I don't know, man.
That's what I mean. Like, it could be that it turned him on, or it could have been that he was so bored that he was like trying to entertain himself.
It's hard to tell, man. I think we have to hear from the tube man himself. It's about time that the tube man speaks up in defense of himself.
I guess what I'm getting at is the newfound intersection of the professional world and like being at home in your boxers, being at home in your sweats, being at home in the place where you're used to being absolutely comfortable, where you're used to being intimate, where you're used to like choking the hog, say in the Tubinesque sense.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about. Not that it's like, oh, he got like so turned on by an election like mock draft. But that he was just so comfortable and absent-minded that he didn't differentiate between work and like what he typically does at that desk on a computer.
I mean, did you see that movie Crash or read the book Crash? That J.G. Ballard book?
I saw the terrible movie, but you're not talking about the terrible one about race relations. You're talking about the one about
The one
car
without
accidents
yes.
where people go and like have sex at the scene of like vehicular carnage.
Yeah, it's kind of an amazing futurist book and amazing movie. Kind of, it was incredible. That movie's incredible. But there was always some weird truth to like what J.G. Ballard was talking about. Not to make this too heady, because this is the most hilarious story and then kind of weird story of the week. But I don't know what gets people going. But if you are the tube man, and this is a month out of the election, and you spent your whole life in politics, and I mean, how psyched are you is the question. I'm not here to judge, man. There's no kink shaming here.
As in, how psyched are you that this happened?
Or how psyched are you to be talking politics with your colleagues? Being like, this is incredible. So what if Trump wins? What if he loses? What if Biden wins? What if he loses? And you're just like, this is my favorite shit.
So you're saying that he just got keyed up?
What if?
It's possible.
Hey, man, no kink shaming ever.
All I can think about is that he didn't actually do anything wrong. That's what's but that's what's kind of wild about the entire situation. He didn't technically do anything wrong at all, but he is a laughingstock. It wasn't as if he exposed himself to, say, the public at large. Right. It wasn't as if anyone has claimed this was intentional. He basically just made a fool of himself and a running punchline for someone who is, at an apex for, journalism, for political commentary.
I like his commentary.
He has had some incidents in the past that are not that unrelated to this kind of incident, though.
I don't know. What?
I don't know the specifics enough to really describe them here, but he's had a few sort of like sex-related things.
I mean,
so he's a known horny commodity, I guess is what I'm saying.
Right. So the starting lineup would be him, Keith Van Horn, Keith Van Horn, Keith Van Horn, and Keith Van Horn. That's a solid lineup.
I guess what I'm saying is Tubin did not intentionally get horny on Maine.
I mean, I was going to say, like, he's probably having the worst day probably one of the worst days in his life today. I don't know if we at large can forgive such a tasty joke or forget such a tasty joke, but I feel bad for the dude, man. It seems like a mistake. It just seems like a mistake.
I just don't think he should suffer any penalty for it.
Kind of agree. But you have to. As a New Yorker, you have to be like, take a break. I think he stepped away on his own accord. For a second.
Yeah, that makes sense. I just think like, hey, this is how this is going to work. You made a fool of yourself. You became a laughingstock and the character of the day on Twitter for at least 48 hours, which no one ever really wants to be. But at the same time, you just screwed up. This was really dumb. This was really embarrassing. But it's not like we're going to fire you for it because it's too stupid.
Yeah, it's too stupid.
Obviously a misuse of technology. It's too obviously a 60-year-old trying to get cute with the Zoom conference and doing what old people do online. And that's fuck up.
Oh, yeah, right. I mean, it's a misuse of technology. It's a misuse of your platform. It's a misuse of horniness. It's a misuse of, like, pants.
Was it a misuse of horniness, though? It could have been a fine use of horniness. For all we know, it was fantastic use of horniness. We just don't have enough information.
Is it a bad shot if it goes in, Ben? Is it a good shot if it doesn't?
No one knows.
No, we'll never know.
I don't necessarily feel that much sympathy for him. I mostly feel that there shouldn't actually be punishment for this. Like, the outcry is punishment enough.
I kind of agree. I don't know, but we are not Zoomers, and it's a different scene out there, man. I don't know. Like a lot of the shows we thought were funny are like unwatchable now. So I don't know if this transgression is to other
Right.
people.
I just look at it as the intent.
It was a private thing too. It was like a work Zoom, right?
It's a private thing. I'm just saying he clearly did not intend
No.
to expose himself to his coworkers. Like
Maybe
just
he was
did not
like,
mean to
mission
do that.
accomplished. I did it. I wanted to do that, and I did.
It's been months before I could work up the guts.
Listen, I've been walking this fine line for too long. It's time to just cross that line.
I want it more.
Yeah. Am I clutch or not? These jeans are clearly not clutch. Get rid of these.
So he's probably not going to be around to discuss the election that's happening in like 2 weeks.
That sucks, man. That sucks for him.
On the other hand, we are.
Oh, yeah. Me and you are.
Yeah. I mean,
In a normal
barring, any
Yeah.
sort of incidents during the recording of a Cookies podcast. I wanted to avoid discussing the election and avoiding looking at polls and avoiding the entire horse race that typically surrounds a presidential election. I wouldn't say I've gotten too sucked into that dynamic, other than feeling okay with what I've seen, feeling okay with the polls, and having a bit of optimism that maybe I did not have a couple months ago. Are you feeling all right about the upcoming election?
I am. I hate to be the political hipster here, but I felt good about 2020 the day after Trump was inaugurated because something went wrong, and I think there would have been the correct correction. And everything went wrong for him in these 3.75 years. I think he has failed in every regard, so it has not changed my mind that he was going to get smushed. And the polls, every October they say it, polls like their water level is even, and it ends up being a close race regardless of so many outside factors. But it hasn't shown that to be true this time. This hasn't shown to be true, and it looks like he's going to get smushed, man. And if he doesn't, then it's shamrocks and shenanigans. Who cooked what books, man?
I would agree on that because Joe Biden is certainly not a strong candidate. He does not have, full enthusiastic support from any particular group. But when the election comes down to being a referendum on Donald Trump's presidency, and you're the alternative, that's a pretty good place to be.
Their strategy was boring, but it's going to work.
I don't know if it's even a strategy as much as the only option they had with, say, Joe Biden. To say, Biden, you young firebrand, you get out there and tear it up on the
dance floor,
tours.
on that rave floor, man.
Get out there and rave, Joe. Rave like you've never raved before. Instead, they've been, I guess, strategically hiding him in a basement and trotting him out every now and then.
Listen,
Can't
just keep
believe
him
they're
alive.
They're doing another debate. Get out of here.
Keep him alive, man. Just make sure he's eating his apple a day for his poop. Shout out to Paul Pierce. And make sure he's eating his vegetables. Make sure he's hydrated. Just keep him healthy.
Why is there another debate? Who wants to hear what either of them have to say about any issue? Like, are you fucking kidding me? Hold on. Let me hear what Trump has to say. Like, ooh, sorry, Ken Bone, but like, who needs to hear either of these guys voice an opinion on anything?
Hey, I love the process. So this is tradition. There's 3 debates. They've already canceled one. Have a debate. Maybe we can get, I'm agreeing with you. I think for all purposes, it's been decided. No one is swinging their vote. But is there going to be another fly? The fly 2? More flies?
Have not watched any of the debates. I did not watch the vice presidential debate. I did not watch the town halls. I just don't care. I just don't care a word that comes out of either of their maws.
Well, the frustrating thing is I've grown to love politicians talking about policy, and that is part fear and part like relief, whatever I'm looking for. There was no policy. It was just meme stuff, which was fun in it. It was fun to follow on Twitter and see people shoot jokes out. There's no pride in skipping it, but there's no pride in watching it. I think we're all in agreement. We know what we have to do, right?
Yeah, I'm not boasting about missing it. Oh, I didn't even bother.
Ken boast over here.
It wasn't that hard not to watch it.
Yeah,
like it didn't require much other than me not figuring out how to get CNN on like my Apple TV.
Yeah,
that was what required me not to watch it.
I said this to you the other night. I've never seen a dumber person with a microphone in my life, and that includes our dumbest friends in karaoke. None of our friends are dumb, but that was a bad joke. But all I'm saying is he's trying to put worms into our head, and I'm just tired of it.
I think there's a bit of, what's the right way of phrasing it? There's optimism, but also a sense of disbelief that 41% of Americans, no matter what, are still looking at these two guys and saying, I'm going to vote for Donald Trump.
But it's not about Trump.
That's what I was going to say.
Right.
And people, I understand why that bothers people. They say, this guy, this like COVID rat clown, this guy who is proven without a doubt to be an absolute imbecile, who makes a fool of himself and the nation every single time he opens his mouth. He is one of the worst people on the planet that you could pick to be president if you cast the widest possible net. Like, this is him, the worst possible president. You're going to vote for him, and not only you, but 40% of Americans, maybe it'll end up being 45% of Americans, will vote for this just monster. But it's also, to me, an indictment of the two-party system. There is just a group of people who are Republicans, and it doesn't matter who the candidate is. And on the other side, think of how many people who are from the left who are going to vote for Joe Biden, who doesn't believe in anything that they actually believe in. Joe Biden is essentially an 80s Republican, but I'm going to vote for him because he's the closest to my school of thought. So yes, 40% of people in America would vote for a garbage bag with a frowny face painted on it because it's a Republican. So it's a weird issue with two parties. If you had more and there were more spaces for varying political parties to stake out ground, we might have a far more interesting political process.
Wow, don't get choked up over this. Come on, man. It's just our lives. But I think...
God damn it.
I kind of am more, maybe a more optimistic isn't the right word, but I think I view this differently. I do like the way our government is set up. I think it has to be alive and has to always change. I do like the idea of a more than a two-party system, but stuff goes on in the UK and in Parliament that is confusing, and I think the idea of government is imperfect always, and that's what makes it interesting. And I'm no originalist, but the idea of the way this country is set up is good enough as a foundation, and a lot of things happened after that, and something went wrong with our last president, this current president, and I hope we correct that desperately, because it's about life and death. And a lot of bad things happen, to say the least, but I think to come up with a more perfect solution is the goal of many brilliant people's lifetimes, and it's hard to find the right one.
I guess what I'm saying is there are problems with virtually every form of government. But the two-party system does present this issue when one of them goes all the way off the racks. And one of them isn't even attempting to draw votes from like the median. And then the other one keeps hedging to the right. So we basically have this odd dynamic where you have sort of moderates all the way to the left on one side and then pure lunacy on the other. But those lunatics are set in stone. And I think you will have, at least I hope so, a pretty definitive Joe Biden victory that hopefully will exclude any of those discussions about recounts or, a warlike transfer of power or any of these like the Supreme Court's involvement. Hopefully it will be so decisive that none of that will come into play. My point is just that you are going to have 40% of the voters. They don't care. They're going to vote for who is on that side. That doesn't matter. They could be literally anyone. They will vote for him.
Yeah, and I think this is like some Red Sox Yankees stuff, and I think this is a bit of an unavoidable human kind of reaction to an idea that is that important. And I think to get into the weeds is confusing because everything is confusing. The older I get, the more confused I am about everything I thought I knew about, including basketball for sure. So I think like I can forgive someone for being binary because life is exhausting, man. And it's up to us to do the work as voters. But if that work isn't your cup of tea, like I get it, your vote still counts. And chips fall. And it's very fucking stressful, man. But for everyone to experience politics the same way is asking a lot.
I look at a state like Arkansas, where Trump is up by 20-some points. And it's just kind of incomprehensible to me to say that, so 70% of the people here, 65% of the people in Arkansas, you actually have the same politics as this guy? Or is this just a team that you root for?
It's both. I mean, you got to give them credit, right? Like, there's people who don't think like Cookies Hoops does. And like, it may involve religion, powerful thing. It may involve their local economy, something we don't really know about. It may involve these things that we will never know about. And I don't know. It's like caring. The thing I run up into is I think it's everybody's objective to think that they know what's best for someone else who may not agree. In my opinion, I know there's a lot of people who don't like Joe Biden, but I think he's going to do best by the totality of us among the two options. And even though Trump not winning potentially would be not aligned with their binary thought, I think in my binary thought that Joe Biden has their best interest in mind. And I think it's a really hard thing to do, picking somebody who, or you yourself being somebody who cares about somebody who doesn't think like you.
I don't think that people who vote for Trump generally would say this guy is better for everyone.
I think they would.
People who vote for Trump?
Yeah, I think they think he has the best vision. I do think...
I could not disagree more. I think a huge part of the Trump appeal is that of vengeance. That of...
But so is the Biden appeal.
Disagree completely. I think a huge part of Trump's platform is that I will hurt the people you don't like. I will hurt Democrats. I will hurt immigrants. I will hurt the East Coast elites. I will clean out the swamp. I will hurt your enemies. I am on your side. I will hurt non-white males. I will hurt people who.
Are you talking about talking points or voters?
I don't think you could. I don't think there are many Trump voters who would say, he is better for all of us as a people. They might say he's better for us as a country, but they would not say he's better for like the mass population, because retribution is such an enormous part of what he's selling.
I mean, it's so easy to villainize the other team. And
I mean, it's really easy to villainize Donald Trump because all he does is villainize other people.
But this is what I mean, right? Like, I agree. Me and you have no trouble villainizing Trump's message, and I do have a bit of trouble villainizing Biden's message because I'm pro-Biden. But put a microphone in front of anybody who votes for Trump, and they will not have a problem villainizing Biden.
I think they absolutely would have trouble villainizing him, but that's not even what it's about. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, Biden's position is not saying, okay.
Oh, we're talking about talking points then. If you're talking about campaign talking points, yeah, totally different. I was talking about in terms of people, their point of views when they go to vote.
Oh, well, that goes back to what I was saying before. There are people who vote Republican and they're going to say, I don't like Democrats for X reasons, and they stand for these things, and vice versa. I'm saying, as a political candidate, no one who's voting for Trump is saying he's going to be better for every American. They're saying he's going to be better for Americans like me.
Well, I think that's the same thing,
that's
right?
Trump. I think
like
they're very different.
What's good for me is good for America. I mean,
I think they're completely different. I think Joe Biden is a totally milquetoast candidate, but at least his message is like, I am good for everyone. I will help every person who votes for me, all Americans. And Trump's is specifically, I will help some Americans.
Yeah.
Like they are very different in that regard.
I always say I opt out of things. Like there was
I mean, have you not heard what Trump's been saying for 5 years?
I mean, I watch the debates, but like I think like there was a point in my life where I accepted rain. I was just like, instead of it is a thing that is sometimes inconvenient for me personally because I don't love rain, but like so at a certain point in this last year, especially with COVID, I stopped trying to think about this thing that we've been discussing. I think that it doesn't help me personally, but I also don't think it is the thing I'm interested in. And when, I watch CNN a lot and I watch Fox a lot, not so much MSNBC, but I have to actively try to filter out the things I care about, and I want to watch because they're things I care about, like the stimulus package is really important to me. And I want to get that information as it breaks because I'm eager for it. But all this stuff about like how bad Trump supporters are, it's just like it's rain, man. Do you know what I mean? Rain, man. It's the Sean Kemp of topics.
Well, I mean, I don't care about Trump supporters at all. Like they can be that 40% that votes for him, and there's nothing you can do about it. Like I don't care.
And understanding that people do think some of the thoughts that you may think are, not for you, and strongly not for you, but understanding that there is like no unity or consensus. The water levels at different points where depending on who you're talking about and what their life stories are, and trying to nail it down is almost impossible. You know what I mean?
I at this point, I do not care what someone's excuse for voting for Donald Trump would be. It is completely unacceptable from my point of view. It's
shout out to the Bone Zone, which is his own philosophy.
I'm just saying, at this point, if after everything we've seen, you're still willing to vote for Donald Trump.
But here
I'm
you
like,
go.
I don't care about your explanation.
Okay, then don't care. You know what I mean? Then actually not care. It's a relief, man, because actually not caring and saying you don't care are two different things. And like conservatives have their point of view, and I'm interested in to hear what they say, and I care, but I'm gonna vote my way, and I think just truly don't care, right? Like we have to do that. Because you can't control, you can't magically think your way into Maury going to Philly unless he decides to go to Philly.
I also don't think there's any way to reconcile it. that someone says, "Oh well, here's why," and I would be like, "Oh, okay, I guess that makes sense." Like, nah.
But caring is good, right? Like caring is also good. So
What I'm saying is, at this point, after 4 years of Trump, after everything he's done, the disaster of COVID, the rise of white nationalism, the absolute just brutality and cruelty of his administration. If you're looking at these two candidates and saying, "Yeah, I'm voting for Trump," I just don't care about your rationalization at this point. Like, you're siding with someone that I find so deeply reprehensible that, like, I'm not interested in how you are justifying this.
I mean, that's totally fair. I mean, yeah, I think people on a
If you're
CNN
50 Cent and you're like, "Well, I'm going to vote for him because I'm rich and I don't want to pay more taxes," like, okay, man, cool. That's not interesting to me.
Yeah, I mean, what level of this discussion do we want to go into? Do we want to go into nuance, or do we want to go into like a ABC kind of selection? There's so many ways to do politics, because politics is just life, right? Like, if we didn't have the Senate, the House of Representatives, and the White House, there's politics that happen at your supermarket. Like, this is the spice of life, right? Like, how deep do we want to get into, like, the fact that I'm not getting enough hours and I could work more because that person is friendlier with the boss? Like, ooh, this is complicated.
Well, this is the same
stuff.
reason that I don't watch the Supreme Court hearings. I
But what do you ingest if you have all these valid takes? Like, what information are you receiving if you're not watching the primary source? Are you watching just takes like response to it?
yeah, for sure. But, like, my view on what the U.S. government is at this point is that it's just all like a complete charade. It doesn't work. And for me to get enraged by watching Feinstein do a terrible job of interrogating a wildly conservative and unqualified potential member of the most powerful, judiciary body on the planet, I don't see how I gain from that. I just don't need to experience that in real time.
I thought it was pretty interesting. She's not a very dynamic, like, orator or person on camera.
But you're also very cold, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, like, you run more chill. You aren't going to watch that and say, "This is everything that's wrong with America." Your response is, "This is interesting." I'm
Sure,
like,
yeah.
this is an absolute outrage that we have a 90-year-old up here doing this. It's an outrage that we had the notorious RBG dying at 86 years old while still on the Supreme Court. Like, this is all outrageous to me.
That was clock
It's outrageous.
management, yeah.
It's outrageous to me that we have 67% of Americans who are in favor of universal health care and two political parties who are opposed to it both. That doesn't make sense to me. That's a rigged game. So for me to get into the nuance and say, let's see how this sausage gets made, I'm like, it's all rigged. This is rigged. There is no reasonable explanation for why this government should be how it is unless the whole system needs to be torn up. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a run it back kind of guy, but
You're a proceduralist.
I don't think it's rigged. I think people make their policies known, and the policies. I think our government has worked so well these last 3.5 years because Donald Trump wasn't able to do any of the shit he wanted to do,
And it was tons of the stuff he wanted to do.
He got some judges in, executive orders, all these
Tons
things.
of judges. I mean,
But he didn't repeal Obamacare yet. They fought him on that. He's trying to cook some of the votes. The Supreme Court slashed that down this week. Like, he didn't get his wall made. His three main talking points, he didn't quite succeed, and I find that to be a testament to the checks and balances. I mean, I'm I'm very happy the Democrats have the House, is what
Well,
I'll
I
say.
was about to say that made all the difference right there.
Huge, huge, and that could have gone the other way, but Democrats do have the House, and that was a very huge development in this story.
But all this to say, I'm optimistic in a way that I think we can just cruise into this victory, take our foot off the gas, start planning our parties now,
Rave.
get real overconfident, throw an election night rave like it's in the bag, no worries. Time to just talk about tubes tube.
I want Biden's campaign message to be like, "Aren't you guys tired of this? Just trust me, and you guys can go off and go tubing. You don't have to worry about politics anymore. Tube it up, baby."
So, in NBA news, there's nothing. One nice point, though, if we're talking about the rise of progressivism, potentially players won't get tested for weed anymore. This seems to be a product of the bubble, where apparently they weren't tested there either, right?
Oh, why should they, man? Come on. Better late than never, I guess, but it's frustrating how many ballers we've had suspended by this minor infraction. And human beings locked up in jail.
It's hard for me to tell if the NBA really tests for weed, or you just have to be so high to get caught.
Shout out to champion Deion Waiters, man. I
But
guess
that's a
it was
good
edible.
example, right? Like, he got caught. How? Well, I ingested a bunch of edibles and then freaked out on a plane. Well, that'll do it. That'll get you caught.
Yeah, remember when Damon Sotomayor went through an X-ray machine at the airport, and they're like, "What's in the tinfoil ball?" And he's like, "Weed." And I'm like, "Yeah, we're exhausted too, Damon, Mighty Mouse. Like, this is annoying. Like, it's just marijuana. Can I just get on this plane?"
Do you guys have a plastic bag? No. Fuck it, tinfoil.
Yeah, not the smartest move by one of my favorite squads, the Jailblazers. Those guys were awesome.
You know, looking back at that Portland team, there were some guys who did some gnarly things. Dogfighting.
Oh yeah,
Ruben Patterson was not a good guy for the most part. He did some violent, gross things. But the majority of problems with the Jailblazers stemmed from getting pulled over with weed while in Portland.
yeah.
And if you want to get into the racial dynamics of Portland, I would suspect that black guys in nice cars got pulled over in Portland an awful lot.
Probably, and that was a really colorful squad, man. Bonzi Wells, Rasheed Wallace, Arvydas Sabonis.
Oh, very, very cool team, and they had the Lakers on the ropes, and one of those like mid late 90s?
It's like 99 maybe.
Yeah.
Rasheed Wallace had the Lakers. Oh, that was fun. But yeah, the weed thing is frustrating. Shout out to Kamala Harris. But like, yeah, I love this policy. I'm not even sure the NBA tests for like PEDs or anything. Like, we know people who have gotten busted for stuff, and we don't know the details of it, like OJ Mayo and your boy Tyreek Evans. But all in all, there's not many of these infractions when you compare it to baseball's history or the NFL.
I'm not sure how the NBA has managed to totally slide under the radar,
No send
because we know that several guys from that Orlando Magic team that featured Dwight Howard got busted for steroids. Rashard Lewis, Turkoglu. Not sure if there's anyone else, but those two guys, two important players on that team, both tested positive for steroids, or at least some kind of steroid. And even last year, you had DeAndre Ayton and another young big guy. Was it from the Hawks, right?
John Collins.
Yeah, they both tested positive, and whether that was them trying to mask their urine because they would have tested positive for marijuana, I couldn't tell you. Yeah. But these things happen, and the conversation about the NBA doesn't really change.
Yeah, it's kind of advanced and retro in that way. I think we care too much about PEDs. When that Nosembin Maguire Sosa thing happened and they broke all those records, Barry Bonds, I'm like, they know the risk. Let them use them. Everyone's using them. And it's like a policy with some over-the-counter stuff. Some PEDs, not all, are legal, and leagues decide to make them illegal. And I get stony, and I'm like, well, what is Gatorade then? Like, what is advanced technology? What is having the best doctor? Isn't that a performance-enhancing doctor? And it's hard to find out where the advantage is and isn't. But I'm glad they're getting rid of these minor infractions like marijuana.
Overall, I think the NBA's handling of PEDs is along the lines of what I would recommend. I think they've done it correctly, which is you test for them. If people are found positive, you give them some suspensions. You don't really make a big deal out of it. You kind of purposely downplay it, and you make it clear that if you want to use drugs or PEDs or smoke weed, like, figure out a way to do it without us catching you, and everything's all good. So I don't really know if NBA players are specifically using them, and I don't know enough about that culture to say, oh, maybe now because they can't test for stuff, or these things are so impossible to test for, or it's a different kind of PED, that conversation is totally changed. That could be the case. I just do not know.
Yeah, and, I think of like the Ryan Braun incident, or there's players in baseball and football who really push back and fight with their unions against these suspensions. The suspensions we know about in the NBA, whether it's like an NDA or some policy they have, but it sounds like these guys were in real trouble, and it sounds like, Chris Anderson was on some hard drugs and he came back.
Well, as far as I know, none of the really, really long suspensions were for PEDs that I can think of. I mean, Joakim Noah was suspended, but the ones I think you're referring to, like Tyreek Evans or OJ Mayo, ones that have been multiple seasons and if not potentially career-ending, those were for like hardcore drugs, not
Class A drugs.
Performance-enhancing.
Yeah, and it makes me sad to think that I think Lamar Odom is one of my favorite players and had an amazing career. But it's sad that he was going through that stuff, and the NBA, as far as we know, like, didn't identify it or handle it, and thankfully he's still alive, but he almost died, and as a young man. And, there was a joke about him always, like, being addicted to candy. It's like, well, is he on heroin? Like, what's going on?
He was addicted to sex and drugs in combination. Respect. He wanted it all.
He wanted it all. He was a maximalist. He's like George Costanza with a pastrami sandwich, AM radio, while he's tubing.
I mean, like, exactly. I mean, that's exactly what he was doing. His quote was, well, yeah, it's like they're combined. It's even better. That's exactly what you would have expected. He's like, well, yeah, I like drugs feel good. Sex feels good. So it's feeling good squared. It's hard to argue with that.
It's hard to argue. It's like, this is kind of off topic and it's kind of dark, but I have never met, and we know a lot of people who have died from heroin, and we have known a lot of people who use heroin. I think we've talked about this. I've never had anyone give a bad review of that thing. It's just like, it's incredible. Don't get messed up in it. It's just incredible. I think about it every day.
Oh, the heroin Yelp reviews are incredible.
It gets and if you listen to the alcohol Yelp reviews, they're horrible. It's like, I'm never drinking again. That was terrible. I embarrassed myself. I feel terrible. I've been throwing up all afternoon, and I'm like, I would never do that.
Cocaine, mixed reviews.
Mixed.
Ketamine, good reviews.
Very good reviews. Very good reviews. Acid, amazing. Mushrooms get amazing reviews.
Mushrooms always get really good reviews.
Yeah. Have you ever had mushrooms? I'm curious about those.
I don't get into psychedelics. It messes up my takes.
Do you think the doors of your takes would fly too open?
Do you really need those kind of takes?
The streets are asking for those takes, man. The street peepers are asking for those takes.
Man, maybe I'll take some shrooms and go peep some leaves.
A bunch of my friends, our mutual friends, shroom once a month to quote unquote reset. I'm like, that sounds like a terrifying reset. But they claim all of them love it. All of them are successful, hardworking guys with families, and they trip once a month.
God damn it. A bunch of druggies. You know what we did a few weeks ago before we got sidetracked onto, I don't know, a bunch of other stuff? We started going through perception reality for a few NBA teams. I think we talked about the Rockets.
Shrooms,
we
yeah,
talked about the Bucks. This is just me going back through like a shroomy portal to
that shroomy window that flew
content of the past. Like a DMT machine elf mining old content for new. We talked about a few different teams, and we promised we would talk about more. So, in the absence of other NBA news, let's go through this little rigmarole, talking about perception reality with a few different teams, and then we'll call it quits. One I wanted to bring up was the Los Angeles Clippers. Doc Rivers has departed, as we know. But there was a perception after they lost that now it made sense that they didn't work. There was a problem with the Clippers, and it was that Paul George is kind of a loser. Kawhi is really good, but maybe he doesn't work as a team player. They didn't have an adequate big man to fend off Jokic. Clippers-wise, are you still high on the Clippers?
I think that's the most dangerous team in the NBA. The perception is they were constructed poorly. I think the reality is that's the most dangerous team on the earth, and they should run it back. Maybe small changes. Maybe get like a quicker big man to eat up some fouls versus AD. That team is a Lakers beater, a Warriors beater, and a Bucks beater. I'm in.
I am too, and I can't help but think that for all of Doc Rivers' abilities as a coach, and I think he's fine, that there couldn't be a parallel between the Raptors and then Nick Nurse coming in. That maybe someone who's a little more inventive might make a difference and could turn the Clippers into a really, really scary team. They already are, but just a little more weirdness.
Does Ty Lue do it for you?
I think Ty Lue is a good coach.
Yeah.
I think he's probably not going to depart that much from what Doc Rivers did, but everyone is very complimentary of his play calling, of his scheme. So I would not be surprised to see Ty Lue, as a younger guy, lean into some of those like zone defenses that we saw in Miami and we saw in Toronto. And I think the Clippers are going to be really, really tough next year.
Yeah, it's a Brooklyn situation where I do think Kawhi Leonard is the coach. Paul George is the coach. And Ty Lue is a wonderful option, I think. Good enough. He's in that pool of coaches that won't hurt you, maybe won't help you that much, but it's about roster, and they have the roster. I think it's a shame that first the Lakers had to spend their championship on an asterisk, but that we didn't get to see the Clippers-Lakers because we talked about this last time. They were built to see each other, and I think the perception is Paul George is like a loser. I will take him on any team if I was that team in a nanosecond. I think he has no weaknesses other than he gets sad, and that's a big weakness. So
I don't even think him being sad is a weakness. I just think he played poorly.
Yeah, the shots didn't go down, man. He's awesome. He has no weaknesses. He helps every team he's on. So the rumors are like, another loser on the Knicks. I'm like, yeah, bring him here. I would buy a Paul George jersey in a second.
I had a little thing on Twitter where I was talking about Michael Jordan losing to Orlando.
we discussed this.
And one thing that I didn't get into, because I've done a little more research on it since,
more,
was that even if we acknowledge that Michael Jordan was really tired As he said, he's never been so tired. The numbers don't particularly back that up. You know, his points per game, his rebounds per game, his assists, his steals, his blocks, they weren't really any different from the next 3 seasons in which the Bulls all won the finals. But even going into the series in which they lost to Orlando, Game 6, he had 39 points. It's great. That was Game 5. Game 6, in which they lost to Anthony Avant's Orlando Magic, he just was bad. And it's the same thing of like, we need to subscribe something to why a good player is bad. Michael Jordan in Game 6 against the Orlando Magic was bad. He turned the ball over 7 times. He shot poorly. Something like 40%. But he had, 26 points on like 8 of 19 shooting or something. Whatever. It was a lousy game with too many turnovers. He was bad. And we have to say, well, that wasn't Michael Jordan. That was someone else. And in Paul George's case, instead of saying that's not Paul George, we say, the real Paul George. The actual Paul George this whole time has been hiding, and it's a loser. Michael Jordan, we're willing to say, no, the Michael Jordan I know is an enormous winner and wins all the time. So what we saw was a husk of MJ, an imposter, an interloper, and it doesn't count. Paul George, this is actually who you are.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I love about do you even watch a games bro culture? Because you can sit in front of a game. Like, someone can read any book. And, like, you just take away what you want to take away from it. And to me, Paul George missed shots. And I think, to your point about good players failing, I think failure is built into this thing, right? Every team cannot get better every season, but every fan base thinks they're going to get a few more wins. Mathematically, that just doesn't work. And success and failure is based off of this weird nebulous idea that's built into this mechanism that's unavoidable. Someone's going to have a bad game because no one shoots 80% from the field.
But there's also a style of play or a variety of player who is more likely to be judged by their best performances than their worst.
We want certain players to do well.
When you think of how a lot of people define James Harden, it's coming up short in the playoffs, or Chris Paul coming up short in the playoffs. Dame Lillard.
Paul George, yeah.
Dame Lillard, though, despite not being nearly as good
or
as
having
James Harden,
success, yeah,
and having virtually no playoff success, very little, is not viewed in that way. He's viewed as a beast. He's viewed at his apex.
It also helps that he is an agile small guard. We love to frame those guys as wanting it more. Where Paul George, handsome, tall forward, it's like, shouldn't you be able just to dominate? I thought you were good. Shaquille O'Neal, it's like, well, if I was that big, I'd be that good. I'm like, no. These guys are incredible.
With Kawhi, I think he gets the benefit of the doubt, but he's also won championship, so that comes into play.
Yeah, he's an outlier.
In that way. But it's funny how even great players are defined by their lowest moments, and yet other guys are defined by their peaks.
Agreed, man. I mean,
let's just make a deal here. Let's define everyone by their lowest moment.
Jeffrey Toobin, sadly, we're taking away those rings, Jeffrey. It depends on what you define as lowest.
I mean, I think about this in terms of the Sixers, right? Where everyone's like, the problem is that Ben Simmons doesn't shoot and Joel Embiid is a fat, lazy piece of shit who gets tired late in games and he needs to get his ass in the paint. And you're like, that's the perception of Philly, but that's not really the issue.
What about Jimmy Butler pre-Bub and post-Bub? That's like the tale of two cities, right? It's like, he's not serious. He's kind of a jerk. No one likes him. And everyone who knows is like, none of that's true. And now everyone's like, is Jimmy Butler a top 3 player?
Before it was about how him saying that he, wanted to work really hard was a joke. And now you're like, and that's why you work hard. Yeah. That's why you show up at 3 a.m. Yeah. And you tell everyone that you're working harder.
Listen, like
Pays off.
the NBA that started in 1996 is full of originalists who have to view the game as their founders viewed it, which is practice.
Oh man, this is why the MJ losing to the Magic is still just so fascinating to me, because it's all of these like mental gymnastics to avoid blaming him for losing. How about this? The last game that he played for the Birmingham Barons was in September 3rd of 1994. He announces that he's coming back to the NBA via a letter through David Falk, his agent at the time, that simply says, I'm back. Mid-March. By the time he loses to Nick Anderson and Darryl Armstrong's Orlando Magic, we're at May 18th. That's, what, 8.5 months since his last baseball game? The way it's told, he shows up in his cleats, the bat over his shoulder, and like
The last
thunder
man said he had
thighs
the
from
wrong
swinging.
muscles.
Yeah, like, oh, his thighs are too thick from swinging Louisville Sluggers. Like, it was eight
Shout
and a
out to
half
the
months
original Gun
later.
Crackers.
8.5 months. He played the equivalent of a full third of a season. Like, the average NBA offseason is 5.5 months, like, let's say, if you lose fairly early. He had 6.5 before he came back. Like, whose fault was it if he wasn't in shape?
All right, let's keep this freight train rolling. Save this
I
energy
refuse.
for
I refuse.
Perception Reality. Ben, your time is now. The Philadelphia 76ers.
How did you take me off my incredible
Someone had to do it. man.
Orlando Jordan takes?
You had to take the ball out of your hands in order for you to get the ball back in your hands.
Look, if you don't want to acknowledge that Dennis Smith's Orlando Magic.
Go off, Magic.
Okay,
King.
anyway, the perception is that you're just really throwing me lobs here. The
Ali.
perception is that the Philadelphia 76ers are in shambles. And I would say from a front office standpoint, they certainly are. They could have hired anyone qualified. And the more we learn, it appears that the exact wrong people are in charge. And we've seen the departure of a few guys who are smart dudes from the organization. The last of Hinkey's brood are being purged in a way that is quite ironic. That due to the front office's incredible bungling of last off season, they have consolidated power. You love to see it.
It's like putting a pie crust inside a ravioli surrounded by a taco.
It's exactly
consolidating.
like that.
One bite.
It's exactly like that. But the perception is that the Sixers need to make huge moves. I would say the opposite is totally true.
What?
What? I know.
What?
I know. But when you look at the Lakers, Anthony Davis, LeBron James, some guys who like shooting threes, some guys who play perimeter defense, guys who can pass the ball, guys who know their role.
Stay in your
That
lane.
reminds me quite a bit of Simmons, Embiid in their, first season together with Covington, Redick, and Dario Saric. And they had the best net rating amongst all-starting lineups in the NBA that year. And I look at it now and I'm like, the biggest problem that Philadelphia has is a lack of respect for their own stars. That they think these guys aren't good. That they think the way to complement Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons is to take the ball out of their hands and to put guys like Alec Burks and Tobias Harris and Josh Richardson and lesser players who actually erode the value of their superstars. So in my opinion, the Sixers are very easy to fix. It's just guys like James Ennis. It's just 3-and-D dudes. Use your
The broke
pick.
boy.
I mean, ideally a little bit better defense than him, but I mean, again, those kind of guys, a bunch of guys who can shoot and a bunch of guys who are comfortable letting it fly and then giving the ball back to Ben and giving the ball back to Joe. The worst thing they could possibly do is bring in even more half-court ball handlers who want to look for shots. And that's what people are clamoring for. Ooh, Buddy Hield, Buddy Hield, Buddy Hield. It's another guy who does stuff. He can't pass. He can't defend.
The Sixers just need some lemon pepper. Just a little bit, a dash of something. They're good. The
They
wings
are
are
very
good.
fortunate that Shake is good.
Yeah, that's a good player to have on your roster. And you
They
know,
stumbled into that via Brett Brown drafting him. He was sitting around. In my opinion, they should have almost cut him because they weren't playing him. And he goes out there, and you're like, oh, this guy will shoot threes. He makes smart passes. Not a good defender. Not
cheap.
atrocious. And he's like a total freebie.
yeah, he's free.
And out of everyone on that roster, Joe, Ben, and Shake, to me, are the only three that should be set in stone as starters. And I know Tobias will start because there's absolutely no political will to bring him off the bench, but he probably should come off the bench.
And it's hard to talk about the Sixers now because these appear to be men of action and they're going to do something. So there is 0% chance that the Sixers team will look like this come opening day. But I agree with you. Beware undervaluing someone like Shake Milton, and beware of moving someone like Al Horford for the sum of his parts. I think this team can make it happen through a few smart moves, and it's all magical thinking all the time. And Sixers Twitter is rightfully making wholesale changes, but this team has a top 3 seed in it.
The inclination is absolutely that they need to make a bold move. They need to salvage this roster. It's a magic bullet. Okay, we're going to get the shooter we need, and we're going to get rid of Horford. It's not even necessary.
Don't get Buddy Hield.
Necessary. Don't go crazy. Just bring in some guys who like to shoot threes and who know their role and play a little defense. You got 2 exceptions. One is, I think, about $5 million. One's about $2 million. Those depend on the salary cap. You've also got the 21st pick in the draft and 4 second-rounders. You can sling guys around. Like, you've got Josh Richardson, who needs to be traded. Absolutely.
Gallinari kind of looks like Sixers legend Keith Van Horn on the court. He is a bit better, and I think the Sixers are going to ask for him. Every team is going to ask for Gallo, especially after he came out and said he's willing to play for a contender for a little less money. And he honestly fits on every team too. I
don't think they have.
It's too expensive.
I don't think they can afford him. Him saying, "I'll play for less money," strikes me as him taking like $12 million a year.
And he's worth it. I think he's
for
good.
sure.
Yeah.
I think he's basically saying, I'm not necessarily just going to go to the Hawks and take $18 million a year. Not that they would necessarily do that, but he's willing to hear you out no matter who you are.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's move on. Love this Sixers talk. We'll have more of it, obviously, but maybe we should crawl up to the east, maybe towards the tiny green hand, the Beantown, the home of the BMM. Perception, reality, Ben. What do you think the Boston Celtics are?
I think the perception is that they had a pretty good season, that they have the core of a championship team. But that might be changing. I think people saw
Exposed?
the limitations of this group.
Wow.
But I'm not convinced that they haven't drinking their own green Kool-Aid when it comes
that
to
creamy green chowder?
Yeah, that emerald-hued Tatum-esque beverage. Because
there's green.
People might
draft
actually
beers out
think that Jason Tatum is an emerging superstar. They might actually think that Jaylen Brown is a rising superstar. The fact is, these guys are going to be owed a lot of money. Jaylen Brown's deal isn't insane, but Tatum is going to get a max contract. Mm-hmm. And I think when you look at this group of guys with Kemba, with Smart, they don't really have a lot of upside in terms of becoming a championship winning team that could say, beat the Lakers, beat the Clippers. In a real world, with a competent Philadelphia management, even beat the Sixers. They just don't have that high-end guy right now.
Yeah, I think they're running into the problem maybe the Wizards had with Beal, Wall, Otto Porter Jr. These are all hits. We've talked about this before. Kemba Walker, Jaylen Brown, and Jason Tatum are hits for them. But if you max all three of them out, which they will max out Jason Tatum, I don't think that core is winning anything. I think the league has better options in terms of probability, but there's no way you can't max out Jason Tatum for your fan perception. But I expect Kemba Walker to probably be on the table this summer. I think he can be moved, certainly. But what moves are there to make? There was a BMM website that proposed Marcus Smart for the Warriors number 2, which I don't think necessarily helps Boston at all. And, that was clowned because people thought that Marcus Smart wasn't enough for the number 2. My opinion is Boston should never trade Marcus Smart. I think he makes that team go. He's a unique player that does unique things on the court that you cannot replace.
I agree with that. I also just don't think that Gordon Hayward is going anywhere.
No, he's opting in, yeah.
I think you are financially handcuffed in terms of the moves you can make. You can find some useful parts, but, their rebuild ended up being a bit like the Wizards, as you said. John Wall is good. Beal is good.
Otto Porter Jr.
Otto Porter, solid player. Like, hit. But you just didn't end up with a top 10 player.
Yeah.
You just didn't end up with a top 15 guy. They're borderline, but you would not say that Tatum is anywhere in the same category as Jimmy Butler as a dynamic player.
No.
And neither is Kemba Walker. They don't have dynamic guys. They have good players, but they just aren't like unstable elements.
Yeah, and it was interesting. I was talking to a Celtics lifer right before the bub, and he was like, I believe the stat was, he was bragging about they have 3 starters who average 20 points or more going into the bub healthy. And I'm like, that's not such a great thing. I mean, are we talking about 3 prom kings? And, there's prom king behavior going on in the Beantown. They say the prom king behavior maybe started in the Beantown, but that's for our investigative reporter intern to figure out. But I think that is a misconception of like what a good NBA team is. And of course you need volume scorers, and they have Tatum to do that. And I think the Celtics are stronger than I give them credit for. I love Jaylen Brown. I think he's an awesome player. They are woefully close to purgatory. They're more close to purgatory than we think. And I think these players are young and tradable, and that's an upside for Danny Ainge, who knows what he's doing. But he lost the trade against the Nets. So who's to say he's not going to lose another trade this summer?
Look, Tatum is still young. He's 19. 17 maybe 14?
16. I saw a picture of him, a grainy picture, maybe as a 15-year-old, balling in the bub.
But I thought he showed some decent passing in the bubble. He swung the ball better than he has in the past, I think. He was definitely trying to do that, I would say, with the absence of Hayward for a lot of those games. And he was not bad at it. But we are in the era of apex playmakers, guys who are basketball geniuses. And you see who those dudes are, and you see who are not. Jimmy Butler is one. LeBron James is one. Ben Simmons is one.
Nikola Jokic.
Jokic is one. Doncic is one. Harden is one. Curry is one.
RJ Barrett's one.
RJ Barrett is one. Keith Van Horn is one. But those guys, that's how you do it.
Yeah.
And with all due respect to Kawhi Leonard, we almost didn't give Lowry the respect that he deserves as one of those guys, albeit on a lower tier.
Lowry's finally getting that respect. He's awesome. He is a basketball genius, in my opinion. But, yeah, man, I think the Celtics, Beantown Nation shouldn't be bummed, but I always say not taking action is action, but they might have to take some action. And I think Kemba is a piece that teams want. So if they can turn that into, I don't know, man. Everyone's saying Bradley Beal. I like Bradley Beal so much, but
Bradley Beal is good.
It doesn't
but
work.
It doesn't work. He's another one of those guys. He's a good player.
Yes,
He doesn't
yes.
play defense. He's improved as a passer. Same thing with Devin Booker. Like, really valuable guys, but I don't know that you can have a whole team of them.
Yes,
I think
exactly.
you need to have someone who has like that quality of, it's like a grounding quality. It's that you can be the hub of a team on the offensive side. It's not just, oh, he gets buckets, he makes some good passes. It's like, you don't even have to be the leading scorer. You can be Draymond Green. And the guys like LeBron are the ones who can inhabit all of these roles.
Yes.
But there is something about that like conduit in the middle of an offense, in the middle of a team, that makes you so much harder to defend. And we saw that with Jimmy Butler, despite the fact that he rarely shoots from deep anymore. He just has that ability to draw fouls, to get to the rim, to find teammates. You know, it's a different quality than being a quality two-way wing.
Yeah, and I'm waiting for these stats to get better, but it's not even a vibe, you know. It's like what they do with the ball, the steps they take, the amount of dribbles they take, how many seconds does it take to lead to a valuable possession, you know, like a shot. It's all these things that we call basketball genius. And Bradley Beal works on a team with a LeBron, with a Jokic, with a Doncic, because they do that heavy lifting. And
They are apex Robins.
yes, right.
I mean, for
Yep.
real, Anthony Davis, great player. You're an apex Robin. You're like, you might be the best Robin ever.
Yeah, totally. So, yeah, I don't know if, you know, I think every fan base wants to make this move. I don't see many of those players available aside from like a Chris Paul, or if Paul George is available, which I can't see Jerry West doing. But let's
Although
move on.
he might also be an apex Robin.
I'm a Paul George fan, but
Me too. I think he's great.
could we move on to, maybe we mentioned Toronto. What's your
I want to
take?
skip Toronto and go right to RJ Barrett.
You know, that's
And the New
music
York
to
Knicks.
these ears, man. These streets in my apartment love that question.
Because we kind of mentioned Lowry, and I'm like, that's enough for Toronto. What are we going to talk about here? Let's talk about the New York Knicks. What's the perception and what's the reality, Andrew Quo?
The perception is kind of correct in a way that they are the most bungling team in sports history. That nothing good has come out of that bluesy, jammy MSG. Tear down that monument, man. I think that's the perception, is that they're the biggest joke, and every sucker move will be able. I mean, the Knicks will fall for every sucker move, and they're a target to dump players that no one wants. The reality is they haven't behaved like the old Knicks of yore for a long time, and they have created space. They have a roster of young players under the age of 12, and they are something I'm loving as a lifelong suffering Knicks fan. I love the way they're doing this, and some good luck would help, and good luck is design, is a product of design, and bad luck is product of design. And the design is never going to be great, but all we need is to do a Pelinka and get Giannis over to the Knicks.
Do you feel as if the Knicks game plan has now thoroughly been shifted to mimicking whatever the Lakers have done?
After the championship, the asterisks in the bub, you mean
Yes,
at that
yes.
point?
As of like right now, you view them internally saying, well, that's it. That's our path.
Well, I thought they did that last season when they dumped KP for nothing to create space for a Pelinka type move with Kyrie and KD. I loved it at the time on record because those two players don't become available ever. The minute KD got hurt, I hated it. And I thought the KP was already gone, so that was a shame and a tragedy kind of. But I think they've behaved like this forever. The opportunity hasn't arisen, or they've had bad luck since. So they've always had their eyes on the Pelinka type point of view, and I think they're probably looking at Giannis now, right? This year is not the season to do that in, though.
You know, we've given them credit for not dealing away draft picks in exchange for veterans. but it's also because they've really bottomed out. You know, they had to get rid of Melo. Then they traded KP, which I think had more to do with personal grievances between Porzingis and the front office, between Mills or Perry or whoever was making those decisions. I think they just didn't like him. And they viewed him as like, you know, I don't think it had to do with his injury history. I don't think it had to do with his game. I think it was they just did not personally like him.
I agree and disagree. I think that a lot of shenanigans happened in bluesy shenanigans. Very brown with hats, sharp hats, happens in the MSG corridors. And I believe you're correct. I think a lot of that bullshit went down. But also, it was no secret that KP's biometrics were off, and sadly, it came true. I think all this in
does
one.
not strike me that something the Knicks brass would have been overly into is like his biometrics.
But you're thinking about like your perception of the Knicks and not the reality.
For sure.
Of it, you know.
But I mean, I think my perception is fairly close to reality. I would just guess that it had to do with them thinking he was a snot, them not liking the fact that he didn't really want to play center, them not liking the fact that he was kind of like a finesse player who shot threes.
You're giving them way too much credit. You got to bring it down a level. I think they're just like, he doesn't like the blues, man. And that's a joke.
No, I mean, I really think it is that easy. I'm agreeing with you. I think it was like, he's not a blues guy.
Yeah.
He's not a Knick.
Yeah.
You know, Knicks like to punch people in the face. They like blues.
And Dennis Smith Jr. dropped a trip dub in his last appearance at MSG, and I
wanted to take him over Frank anyway.
Yeah, this is Knicks bias, but also like I'm glad that they have drafted and kept the picks. And not to get into the KBB, there's an opportunity here next month in the draft for the Knicks to do something nice. I think the perception of them is right and wrong 50-50. I don't disagree with anybody clowning them, but if you're the type of Knicks fan I am, this is the best situation we've had in a while.
I guess. You know, I don't think this is better than when they had Porzingis. I don't think this is better than when they had Porzingis and Melo. I don't think this is...
That's been a little bit. I mean...
Right, I just mean, what did they trade Porzingis 2 years ago? I think them having Tim Hardaway Jr.
But he was hurt for the year before. That was the bottom, I think, when Porzingis had that serious career-threatening injury and they had nothing. And I thought that was the bottom of the Knicks experience. But for the champions didn't do much and got a champion.
Well, you're a bigger believer in a blank slate than I am.
Oh, I love the blank slate. It's hard to get there in the NBA. Especially when, and we're not talking about a blank slate in Indiana or Orlando. We're talking about a blank slate, and there's Katz's Deli sandwiches. There's raves waiting to be had. And Daryl Morey, so I was watching the news, and your boy, the big frittata man, the big deep dish egg dish, went on, and he was talking about like whatever stocks or something. And then they asked him about Daryl Morey. And he was sad about it. He was like, well, you know, Daryl's been my guy for 14 years, and I wish him the best. And we always knew this day would come. But he always wanted to raise his kids in the East. And I was like, I think I texted you right away. Like, the East? I know some teams in the East that could use him.
The Charlotte Hornets?
The Horn Dogs? But, you know, I know he's a fan of Broadway. I know the Knicks situation. And we talked about this last week. I don't know what his taste is, his proclivities are, if he wants a blank slate or if he wants a superstar intact. His farewell message to Houston was very sweet, where he made it a point to thank James Harden for all of his help. And I thought that was really self-aware and awesome. And that's why I love him as a GM. And the Knicks don't have that. So I don't know what he's looking for, but the Sixers do. I don't know. Things are looking up for the Knicks, but they can't look any more down.
Yeah, as I said, you like a blank slate more than I do. I mean, I understand.
I'm a painter, man.
I understand the appeal. Exactly. You're like, it can only build from here.
Mona Lisa, here it comes. Oh, maybe next time.
A stage and bluesman on top of it.
The Scream 2, more screams next time.
You know, when I look at the Knicks, and I don't think this is any different from the perception or even the reality. There just isn't anything there. So I think we're seeing the same thing. But I look at it and say, I am skeptical that this group of guys who's running the Knicks will look at this barren field they have and say, imagine the possibilities if we're patient. Imagine what we can do with unlimited time.
But I don't see it that way. I see it as imagine the possibilities because we have no albatross. There's no anchor right now.
I hear what you're saying. I also just think getting to that point where you're just is like incredibly easy. Like
no teams are in that position.
Well, I mean, probably half of them are. You can always get rid of players. Like, it's not hard to do.
I disagree. I think teams. I think you can pick any team that's actually in the NBA and point to something that is a slight issue. The Knicks have none of that.
That's because they don't have anyone of any value.
But this is the discussion, right? Like,
but that's why I'm saying I mean, we've had this before. I'm just saying I just don't look at this and say this is promising because there is nothing promising. The Knicks have no talent that is of any interest to anyone in the NBA.
Mitchell Robinson gets a return for sure.
He's good. He's good, but
that's a player, right?
They also don't play him enough. Yes, I take that back. I retract that. It's just Mitch. Yet the rest of the guys I have no interest in. I don't think any team.
Someone will take RJ Barrett, but they should not trade RJ Barrett. You know, you live and die with him for the next 3 years. But a better question would be, instead of rehashing this convo, is what do you think? Leon Rose will do something, and he has yet to do something. Instead of predicting player moves, what is his point of view?
Well, that's where I was getting to, was that I think they will exercise some patience. I don't think they're going to do rash moves where they just dump draft picks left and right. But that said, I don't know that you bring in this group and say, let's do a patient rebuild. No. I could be wrong. But I just have no idea.
I'm talking about the opposite of that.
I think that's what is more likely to happen. I do think them trying to say, okay, we're going to get CP3. Okay, let's put a package together for Zach LaVine. Okay, let's try to sign this guy. I think that is more likely due to the people they have, the fact that free agency seems to be now the most focal point of how they're going to get better based on the Pelinka model that the Lakers employed.
Yeah, I mean, there is no LeBron James available in this offseason.
I mean, that's the huge problem with following this philosophy is that it doesn't work unless LeBron
It's always LeBron. Yeah. But also, like, I don't think being a mercenary hunter, someone who hires mercenaries is a bad thing. The Lakers won the damn championship. Ainge won a championship by just getting, mercenaries just to put on that tiny green glove. But I think there's a lot of ways to do this. Obviously, I would like to see a rebuild that bears like fruit, like Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, that we can love as fans. But that's not going to happen because the ping pong balls didn't get us Ja Morant. He would have been the one, or Zion in a dream, and we're stuck with RJ Barrett. But Mitch is one of those guys that they could start building around, and there's risk there, obviously, with the game and the way the game's going and what Mitch does. But I have hope. If they get Halliburton, I'll be very happy.
Well, this was the thing about Hinkie's rebuild, was that it basically said, we're going to be bad every year until we get those guys. We're going to pick in the top three,
but
top
the Knicks
four.
Have never done that. Like, we don't have to relitigate that, right? Like,
well, this isn't a relitigation of anything. I'm mostly saying that Hinkie's plan was never to say, we'll be bad for a few years, get a couple guys, and then we'll just build no matter what. And I think that's kind of where the Knicks are at right now, where they're like, hey, we've been bad. We've been bad for several years. Here's what we have to show for it. We got a couple lottery guys. We didn't get lucky. We didn't get Zion. We didn't get Ja. You know what? But I think it's time to move on from being a bottom three team. I think it's time to win some games now. We've gone through our version of the process, and it didn't really pan out for us, but we're done with that. I don't think there's a will to say we're going to win 22 games the next 3 years until we get a Ben Simmons, a Joel Embiid, a John Morant,
Well,
a Karl Anthony Towns. I just don't think they're willing to do it.
I mean, who knows? This outcome is based off of a design, and I think their design is like, right now there is nothing to move on. This offseason, there's nothing to move on. They can do small things like Nerlens is out there, Bogdanovi, one of them is out there. I'll never know which one, but I think when the time is to do something, yeah, then MSG will do that. But I cannot fault them for not doing that. I was one of the weird people who liked the fact that Dolan lowballed Durant. That was trouble. And I hope Durant comes back and wins a championship. But like, his injury was serious, and it changed the whole dynamic of that build-up, which had been years in the making. That's bad luck. And since then, like, it's not their fault they got the eighth. It is their fault they got the eighth pick, but they won a bunch of games at the end. But like, this is almost my political take, which is like, I'm watching the games, bro. I'm watching the debates. I'm watching the hearings. I'm at MSG at these games. Hopefully soon again, but these losses occur like rain, but it is true, the perception of them as the dumbest team ever, but it doesn't have to be true moving forward. And I don't think being a prisoner of that idea is either reality or enjoyable.
I just don't view the Knicks as a team that is going to figure it out. I think they just have to get lucky.
What if they get Morey?
They will. I think it's... but they just hired a bunch of guys. They have this huge front office. If they got Morey, they'd be fine. But he's not.
Perry's on a 1-year deal, so the GM slot is open.
Yeah, look, if they get Morey, then I change my opinion. I'm talking about
thinking, but
the current group we have here. Like, the Knicks are just going to have to get lucky. They're going to be bad. And the one problem with the lottery changing from, having basically set in stone that you'll get a bottom 4 pick or a top 4 pick, however you want to phrase it.
The flattening of odds.
The flattened odds really hurt a team like the Knicks. And because it encourages unproductive behavior, which is adding veterans, just trying to win some games. And
but they didn't do that. I mean, no one in the right mind, they have to say it for the fans, no one in the right mind thinks a Morai, a Pordai, and a Taj Gibson is doing anything. They just did that because they had to fill the roster.
I disagree. I don't think they did it to fill the roster. I think they did it to try to win games. I think, as we've heard from when Mills was, demoted, sent to another office, I don't know, given a new email account, that they told Dolan this is an 8th seed.
But you're doing the Jordan tired thing. Like, nothing's going to shake your opinion of the perception of these Knicks for you, because you're using rightfully using these examples. But really what we're seeing is Jordan losing sometimes to the Magic. And, dribble bias doesn't even just pertain to players. It pertains to the way we see a lot of things. And this doesn't necessarily... The moment isn't what is the only thing Knicks fans can hang their hat on, because the past is trash and the future is always unknown. But this moment, I'm talking about, like, the perception is 0, the reality is 3 or 4.
I mean, I just don't see why Mills would have gotten demoted if this was the plan, if there was no expectation that they were going to win games, if them spending whatever it was, $60 million on power forwards and a few of them being, older vets, if that wasn't viewed as a way to reclaiming lost glory and making them competitive, I just don't see why Mills would have been demoted. I don't see why you would have brought in new voices if people were content with this team.
Oh, they're just meat shields.
Losing games.
I mean, I think Mills, Dolan's main flaw is that he's loyal, and we reward loyalty his crooked ass politics scene, you know. But I don't think I think probably Mills was ready to go years ago, and he kept him on. And I don't think any of this matters. I don't think any of this minutia matters, because you luck into some things and you luck out of some things. And all this shuffling has been pretty beige on the Knicks' part. Like, Mills is fine, and he's bad. Leon Rose is probably fine. All these guys don't really make a difference until a player walks in that door, through that door. And the potential of that is always something like we can always, the secret about, you know, being like, well, I'm picturing Giannis walking through that door. I'm like, that might happen. It probably won't. But
I mean, to me, that's literally the only possible way that the Knicks figure this out.
That's how any team gets good, right? Is if a good player comes through
Well,
that door.
I don't know. I mean, other teams can figure it out, and they can, whether they get a player from the draft or they make trades, but the Knicks have no chance of figuring it out. None. It will be because someone like Giannis says, okay, the Knicks, the way that LeBron went to L.A. and was held as a savior and brought them a title, I'm going to do that in New York, and Kawhi is coming with me.
This is
I'm going to do
this
that
is an
in New York,
opportunity,
and someone
right?
else does.
This is a probability.
That
Has a probability.
They're one of the few markets where it could happen. The Sacramento Kings can want that all they like, but it's not going to happen.
The
Knicks
Pacers
are-
ain't going to do it.
No, it's New York.
And even Morey being like, I kind of love New York. Like, that doesn't happen with Boston.
Agreed. It's New York, it's Miami, and it's L.A. At least in this current ecosystem. Those are the three. It's just those three.
That Miami
So,
culture.
so to me, the Knicks have a chance. It just happens to be only that, and that's why they still won't just go out there and dump everybody and hire Daryl Morey immediately, because like we might be able to pull this off. We can kind of pull this off. And that's what we've seen with the Lakers and the Knicks more than any other franchise. Their reluctance to modernize, to bring in smart people, because they have that trump card. And that's why the Lakers is so... It's such a perfect example for the Knicks, because they didn't get smart. They didn't have to do anything intelligent. They just sat there and someone wanted to come. We're the field of dreams. We're the Mecca. And I get it. And they're not wrong.
I mean, the Knicks have R.J. Barrett, Frank Ntilikina, Mitchell Robinson, and Kevin Knox on their roster. They drafted them all. They have not moved them. They've been on the roster for years now, a couple of them. They didn't pan out as... A couple of them might be useful. I think Mitch is a star. The other guys might not even be starters in the NBA. That's bad luck in the draft. That's a lot of moving parts. But they have waited for that LeBron James to walk through that door that whole time. And they have not settled on another player. You know, Julius Randle, that contract's fine. There was not really... That was not a seismic signing. It is in the Knicks' nature more to me to do what the Brooklyn Nets did with Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant, and kind of switch up their coach, you know, that got them there. So the Knicks, this is a new thing. Maybe my lasting point is they're not behaving like the way we want them to behave. They're behaving differently. And I think not being observant of that is joyful, because them being the worst is the best. But I think they are maybe more joyless than ever because they're not totally being dumb here.
Yeah, I think that's actually my biggest problem with the Knicks. They are extraordinarily boring. They are so fucking boring. And it's exactly what you just said. It's not the dumb flame out where they're just throwing draft picks and young guys away and bringing in overpriced veterans who are at least entertaining to watch. They're also not going full youth movement like they did when Walsh was running the organization, and they were playing young guys and discovering young guys and had this entertaining style of ball. They're still giving a lot of minutes to middling veterans, spending tons of money to bring in free agent guys who are average players and all kind of play the same position. There's just nothing interesting about
Leon
them.
Rose, fucking Mike Miller. None of this is entertaining.
This is my problem. I'm just They're so dreary. None of these young guys are that exciting. Like, why didn't they bring up Wooten and just let him dunk on people and block like shots into the rafters for like 3 months?
I mean, I
They like
love
just let him
Wooten.
sit there in Westchester. Like, come on. Like, that's the problem. Like, go full chaos. Go out there and lose games with young guys playing like maniacs. Or trade everyone and just start like Lance Stevenson and Deion Waiters and just go full haywire. Like, do one of the two.
It's so funny, right? Like the devil's in the details. I found this season to be fascinating, but like the interns made this beautiful Mitchell Robinson shirt. We were ready for this kind of interesting last month and a half of this league, and it was unfortunately Rudy Gobert ruined everything, man. But sacre bleu. But I think I was looking for some of that little spice at the end, but like many things, it went wrong.
You know what didn't go wrong?
This podcast.
This podcast, ironically, despite talking about so many topics,
I love cookies.
this pod, however, was
Cookies.
yet again
I love cookies.
Cookies.
I love cookies.